I am Tom Henkenny, the director of FIDM's Bachelor of Arts in Digital Marketing. Welcome to what we're calling the Future of Digital Marketing. This is the first in a series of discussions where we're going to be looking at the future of the design of business. Specifically, we're looking at retail, culture, events, but we're beginning today with marketing. And let me start, before we get to that, with a couple housekeeping notes as well. We've saved some time at the end for Q&A. So as the hour goes through, feel free to submit some Q&A questions down below on the link where it says Q&A, not on the chat side, put it in the Q&A side. We'll take a look at those. As they say, operators are standing by. And this is also being recorded, so we will send a link to everybody later this week for you to watch it and share it as you needed. We have invited two amazing powerhouses who are instructors at FIDM to join us today. Kristen Zimmer was the genius behind the brand collaboration between SEGA and Glamglow. Specifically, she brought on board Sonic the Hedgehog and created the hashtag gaming and masking, which went viral. Merging beauty and gaming for the first time led to huge brand engagement, product sellouts. Later, we'll be joined by Anisha Dubois. She led PR for all brands under Australian fashion labels. Last year, she started an incredible e-commerce site. It's called Well Unknown, spreading the word about the selling of products from emerging brands. Before we get to them, though, I'd like to start with a step back and discuss why we're here and what we hope to accomplish in the next hour or so. 2 months ago, who had heard of a sourdough starter? Certainly not me, and yet here's my photos. I'm now baking sourdough bread, sourdough pizza, sourdough waffles, sourdough avocado toast. Zoom. Zoom was what we did when we wanted to creep on a photo or dress like Elton John for Halloween, and now it's the way we connect and communicate with everybody. We all unknowingly touched our faces on average 28 times per day. Yes, I did look that up. Now there are snap filters to tell us each time we touch our face. The paradigm has certainly shifted. We are living a new normal. The times, they are a change in, whatever cliche you would like to apply, here we are in the new now. And it's been incredible watching marketers pivot. Burger King started giving away Whoppers. Did you see this? They're giving Whoppers specifically to students who answered questions. And they were not easy questions. Take a look. These are actual questions they were asking. And if you got it right, you got a promo code for a free Whopper. We've seen a lot of graphics and animation because Hollywood is shut down. It's unsafe to be on set with so many people. And that shutdown has led to less commercial production, of course. So brands are using consumer-generated content while also attempting to stay on message. Take Teleflora. Here's a photo from their Instagram account. It's covered with stories they call Love Out Loud, and they're branded with that pink flag at the bottom. All the content is user-generated. It's really interesting, though, how they reacted to Mother's Day. They've been running for the past year or so a campaign called Love Like a Mother. First, let's take a look at a 10-second spot so you can get a sense of what they were doing.
Thank you. Oh, you got some schmutz.
If only the world loved us like you do, Mom. Happy Mother's Day.
So obviously that's a produced spot that was before the quarantine. Let me show you the spot they created for Mother's Day this year in the midst of the quarantine.
When things are at their worst, we can always count on moms to be at their best. While the world around us is hunkered down in fear, they're the ones on the front lines, making the new normal feel a little bit more normal. All in the hopes that years from now, when kids think back on this time, they won't think about the fear or the uncertainty. They'll tell stories about playing ball in the house and not getting in trouble, about epic birthday parades, social distancing dance-offs, and uninterrupted family dinners. They'll remember that while everyone was being homeschooled, they didn't just learn reading, writing, and arithmetic. They learned what really matters in life: love, laughter, and a good internet connection. And during this time when we're all told to stay apart, they'll find that somehow we've all grown a little bit closer. So that one day when this madness is all finally over, when this new normal goes back to normal, our children will one day tell stories about how in the spring of 2020, the world did not stop. It kept spinning and moving forward, fueled by the most powerful force on earth, a mother's love.
Still on message with what they were doing a year ago, but clearly they're using that user-generated content. All the feels, right? Like, take a second, dry your eyes. Let's just talk about this Mother's Day for a second, since it was this past weekend and such an interesting place to kind of dive in a little bit. For the past 7 weeks straight, you can see here the top 3 search terms from Amazon. Toilet paper #1, face mask #2, hand sanitizer #3. Let's dissolve in what it was as of May 2nd. Toilet paper and hand sanitizer lost their positions to Mother's Day gifts. And then we went on to spend 8.5% more on moms this year than last year. So consumers are starting to spend again. Brands are clearly watching every move that they're making. And that's where we want to begin the conversation with our 2 panelists and experts today. 3 months ago, I can remember talking to brands who were only concerned with ROI, or rather with the likes they were getting on accounts. They were concerned with the fact that they might have people who were paying to no longer have the privilege of watching their commercials, right? Because we subscribe to Hulu, we subscribe to Netflix. 2 weeks ago, though, I spoke with a marketing director of a beauty brand, and all she wanted to know was, how do I generate revenue for my company? So Kristen Zimmer is going to join me here as well. I think she's turning her camera on as we speak, and start to look at, hi, Kristen.
Hi, Tom.
Talk us through this then. Where are we at?
Yeah, so hi, thanks, Tom. So, I mean, right now there is such a growing digital footprint, and it has been accelerated by the pandemic. I mean, we're in a time right now that's a really unique moment. We have found that, having a foundation in digital marketing is now more valuable than ever. So, I mean, companies who had that foundation are leap years ahead of companies that did not have digital yet, but that doesn't mean that companies that are not yet in the digital space aren't having opportunities, because right now what's happening is companies have been able to jump in. The issue for most companies are that they're having to cut their budgets, or they never had a budget to invest in digital though. So what I have to say though is that, digital is so important, and investing is still so important. And I promise that keeping the investment in the digital is, important for both the short term and the long term. So although the landscape is different and some industries may not be getting the same ROI, which is, what you were talking about, where's the revenue? Where is it? It doesn't mean that, with people spending less on many categories of goods, being, there's more focus on the essentials, the wellness, the self-care, and you're not maybe buying as much makeup or your apparel, but the opportunities to generate those leads are still out there. And, you can still start the new conversion, because, people are still looking to these companies and still want to know what's going on. So, I mean, what I'm saying is pretty much how we look at everything needs to really shift right now. Companies need to pivot their approaches, their messaging, and just remember that we have the most hyper-focused audience available to us right now. So it's what we're doing in this time to make sure that we still make our brands present out there, and have a way to connect with them. So to me, I would say that now is the time to create new leads, find ways to reward them, to surprise them. And I'll touch on this a lot more later. I think that Carla Buzazzi, which is on the screen right there, managing director of WGSN, shared in a recent trend guide on the current COVID environment. And I think she summed it up very perfectly with that quote. It says, in an uncertain world, brands need a new plan. History has shown us that in times of crisis, creativity flourishes. And I have no doubt that the coronavirus pandemic will unleash a new era of innovation. To do this, businesses and individuals might have to rethink not just marketing messages and routes to market, but entire business plans, product assortments, and even their reason for existing. And now is the time to start planning. And so I think that's what's happening right now.
It's so interesting because the brands I've talked to have been worrying that they've wasted their money going after likes and shares and retweets and all of that. But you're saying no, that building that brand equity was smart. And you're actually saying they should try and spend as much as they can, but given some constraints.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't say spend as much as they can. I think that, obviously 100% they should invest. I mean, I know everyone has limited budgets right now. And so I think that it's making sure you have an investment out there, that you're still putting money in there, that you're still making sure you have that opportunity. Right now there is the biggest active audience a brand will ever see. It's an audience which is active. You have them in front of you. And you have ads that are cheaper than ever. So how are you going to connect is really important. But you also have to remember that once we get back to normal, or what is now the new normal, you will need to continue to support this. And then each day, we're all getting smarter. We're getting more connected, more digitally normalized. And so as that's happening, consumers will be able to continue to spot things out. And so you just have to make sure you stay on top of it. Make sure your messaging is right. Make sure you're taking the right approaches as you're putting together your ads and your connections with them. So right now it's about building and maintaining a community. And then, just know that this will later translate into the sales. And I'll say this probably a couple times in this conversation, but it costs about 5 times as much to get a new consumer than it does to keep your current leads. So, those investments may seem like you're putting money in, but especially now when the cost is less, you're actually saving money, if that makes sense. So, yeah. And so, you just have to think that social media really is the go-to place for consumers right now to discover content. People have been spending more time on social media consuming content. And so if you use the opportunity to stay close to customers while increasing your reach and utilize the lower cost, it's really an advantage. So now I just want to refer to a few slides which kind of put this all together and show kind of some of the shifts and changes that are happening right now. And I think a key factor to remember is, this is just temporary. Just because we're all obsessed with hand sanitizer, hair dye, cooking, and DIY projects doesn't mean that we always will be. So, people are going to be shifting back, what they're looking for and looking at. And so I think that's really important. So if you just look at the first thing I had up there, can you just go back for a second? Yeah, so some of the top search trends that are driving SEO and PPC, the pay-per-click, I already noted a few of those. So it's, you have your basics where people, of course, are looking for the symptoms, the vaccines, the treatments. But, I mean, in the past couple of weeks, of course, the hair dyes and coloring, it's been how long we've been in here. But then there's other interesting things that have been coming up, like 3D printing, weather radar, car leases for online purchase. So it's kind of like those trends. And of course, flower delivery, especially, I think some of that was generated from Mother's Day, but I think it's also about, people really wanting to make their home space, look better. So now if we go to the next slide, you can see some of the things that have been kind of seeing significant decreases. Of course, we would be aware that, travel has been just, non-existent. And then of course, tools, people are not building. And then of course, apparel, that has seen a downtrend, especially dressing up. So dresses is the one that's really seen the shift downward. Makeup, people, this is an interesting one because I think what has happened is at the beginning, people were not wearing a lot of makeup. The other side of beauty was seeing an uptrend, but people were not wearing makeup. But messaging is starting to shift. People are saying like, we need to, even campaigns are going out there that are really making people beautify more, and people are this is starting to see a little bit of an upshift. And then of course, restaurant reservations. Now on the next slide, you can see this just kind of shows I got this from Neil Patel, and it's really interesting because all of these just show the differences in how traffic and conversion is happening right now in the marketplace. But the thing is, we know this will change. We know in 6 months, this is going to look completely different. And so that is one thing about life and how the markets are working. It's, you know, although this is what we have today, we don't know what we're going to have in 6 months. And that's almost the same perspective of how you look at digital in general. A lot of the platforms that were successful 6 months ago were not the platforms we were focusing on now. And so it shifts in traffic, shifts in platforms, all of it kind of is the same. So if you go down to the next slide, you can see kind of, this just shows, and it goes parallel to the other slide of how people are shopping, where the sales are right now. You know, you see where the year over year is versus the week over week. And so there are declines and upticks in different areas. Clothing is starting to have more of an uptick, you know, and that's a really positive to see people are starting to purchase clothing. You know, sporting goods continues, you know, weather's warming up. And so people are going outside more. Household appliances and the need to just kind of, you know, continue to keep your house, have upkeep on your house. So another interesting one. And I just wanted to round this out by showing everyone the last thing on Google Trends, because Google Trends is a great resource for brands. You know, this is something that comes out daily and really can help you as you're putting together your SEO and even with your pay-per-clicks, you know, of just looking at what is going on in the marketplace. What can you really focus on of making sure your messaging is right, you know, making sure you're aligned out there. And so if you look at some of the key things during the past week, both in the US and worldwide, it's kind of interesting to see, you know, of course you had Mother's Day, but then, you know, you had things like, you had, because of what happened with The Simpsons and the trend with The Simpsons, there was highlights on that. You had the Blue Angels flyover. You had looking, because everyone's getting concerned about summer camp. You have people looking at opportunities of what are they going to do for alternatives of summer camp. So just, it's really interesting. And I really recommend utilizing Google Trends. It's a great resource. So. And now on to our next points. And so just kind of from there, I would probably, you know, talk about that, you know, from here, it's just that our consumers are really getting to the place where they're
looking for events, and they're looking for live classes, and they're looking for online interactions, right? Is that where we're at?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, it's just companies are really shifting what they're doing. You know, it's like they're finding ways to incorporate digital in different ways. Kind of it aligns exactly with what the digital trend of the digital summer camp is. You know, it's going from live classes to virtual events, shopping and entertainment, you know, is especially with small business, is, you know, not having as much opportunity out there. It's like, what can they do to still connect with consumers? So businesses have shifted and built opportunities to keep connection with their core audience and customer. You know, additional awareness and connection also can be reached through really interesting other tools. You know, email blasts and SMS text messaging has been like quadrupled. And I'm sure we all have seen an increase in both of these. Yeah. One unique thing that some companies are doing is creating actions to engage consumers, be it like providing Spotify playlists or incentives for user-generated content, or other brand extensions, you know, for links to Instagram Live Talks. All of these provide connectivity, humanization, and, you know, additional loyalty. So I think that that's really interesting to see, you know, and then I mean, like, who would ever think we could tour the Louvre, take a cooking class, and go to like a book club all from our house, like in the same afternoon? You know, it's really interesting how like all of these companies have been able to have this fast acting approach to shift and pivot to kind of like promote opportunities. And it's really been key. And I just think that you have to look at the resources and the support that we've been able to also utilize through Facebook business, and you know, that's been a huge resource for companies to support them.
We're plowing through our time, but I do want to chat about the new platforms and the new offerings that are starting to emerge. You know, is Facebook, you know, we keep hearing the conversation about the demise of Facebook. Is it the demise of Facebook? Are we seeing new things? Can everybody coexist in a friendly environment?
Yeah, I mean, I think that people just today or yesterday and today, Facebook just launched their refresh, and they continue to find ways to be viable, to integrate. You know, they have a huge partnership or a big part of their integration with Shopify. And, you know, I think that the key here is that it's kind of like every platform for every person. And, you know, I think it's about also where does it fit with each target. You know, I think a lot of times it's not the first priority, but whenever you look at a brand, they always keep Facebook as a priority. You know, other new platforms and offerings continue, you know, to emerge and have opportunities, you know, chat apps, TikTok, and now Zoom. You can even look at what streaming services are doing to start to play in this space. And, you know, I just would say that, you know, the space continues to evolve and the definition of opportunities will too. So, you know, like I was saying, the new and underused platforms are starting to take center stage. You know, you look at Instagram Live, TikTok has already had, you know, been buzzing, but this like past couple months has really brought it to mainstream and lured in use by multi-generations. You know, before it was really thought of as Gen Z, but, you know, now it's really being used across the board more. And then Zoom has come out of nowhere to be a household name. Yeah. Streaming service has become a lifesaver for entertainment and, you know, entertainment studios. Gaming is stronger than ever. You know, now we have Animal Crossing, which literally has enhanced like connectivity as well. So I'll talk about this more later, but I just think it's just really a big time for new platforms.
Why don't you run us through, I know you've got some examples too of some of this that you want to show us.
Yeah. So, you know, in terms of trends, I think that, and I'll just run through some of these really, really quick. If we can just go to the, so if you look here, I mean, across the board, you know, you had Moto Yoga, who now offers, you know, fitness is just one example of a fitness studio who now is completely virtual. Carter's has partnered with Kelly Clarkson. They are hosting baby showers. Mercedes-Benz put together this Zoom partnership with a bunch of car enthusiasts. You have a lot of beauty brands who are doing Instagram lives and consultations online, since, you know, now facials are not available. A Current Affair, which is a huge fashion event, now went completely virtual and people are buying over Instagram. Of course, everyone knows about Club Quarantine. You have, and then you have museums who are also, you know, now completely virtual, going for tours. On the next slide, this is an example of two different things. You have the driver of a discount, you know, with Tom's, known mostly for not their cozy slippers, usually focusing on a new product to try and drive, and, you know, something that is a perfect message for the the quarantine period. And then Daily Harvest, which is going to, try and get new customers, giving a discount. And, these are both ways of, I would say, generating new leads more than anything. So these were good examples there. And then this is just both through Instagram Live as well as through Zoom. You have all different meetups. You have graduation parties, you have proms, you have birthday parties, you have Bon Appetit did a special eating dinner party. So I mean, just there's all ways of connectivity that are going out there, and a lot of this is through paid partnerships or just ways to really create buzz. And then, you had shown something with Burger King earlier, and I just thought this was another interesting approach, especially because this was multi-platform, including on TV, where Burger King had a giveaway with a scan involved. And so this is a great way, of course, to generate new leads and start to, of course, with the message, it's creating, an opportunity to really hone in and bring in, new brand loyalty for a brand, which has, kind of not been a front runner lately. And it's interesting, both Burger King and Chipotle have been doing a lot in the space lately to kind of stand out.
Kristen, I have to move us along because we're going to run out of time otherwise, but I do want to hit on, I know one of the important things that we had talked about is the new awareness of the boomers and by brands of these different generations. I wonder if you can talk to that a little bit for us before we jump to Anisha.
For sure. I think that people don't realize how boomers really have taken and been at the forefront of opportunity. They are more tech savvy than people really think. They're out there. You have boomers who have been able to take advantage of Instagram, and you have influencers on TikTok now who are boomers, and they are just as savvy and opportune to really be out there, and they're setting up websites, and they really have emerged in this space as something to pay attention to. I think brands are starting to take them more seriously as someone who that they really look at as a new opportunity to target and retarget and open up their brands to. And I just think it's something to keep in the back of your head as you're putting your plans together, that the boomers are on digital now, and they are spending money, and they are ready. So.
Awesome. It's super interesting. I know we have a lot more to talk about. I'm going to ask you to pause here for a minute, and then let's switch our gear and talk to Anisha. Anisha will be joining us to talk a little bit more about the earned media side of things. And if you're not familiar, earned media is a combination of traditional PR, influencer marketing, and then of course, user-generated content. Anisha, as I mentioned, is an expert on this, having worked in-house with one company, and now her own agency, and then her startup, Well Unknown, which is an awesome website with a super interesting premise behind it. So as I say, Kristen will come back. Feel free to submit us some questions in the Q&A at the bottom, and we'll get to those. I know some great ones have already come in that I'm excited to ask you both. Anisha, hi, nice to see you. So let's discuss the state of earned media then as it relates to digital marketing. What are you seeing?
Of course. So we're all in a state of dealing with a global pandemic, and with layoffs and budget cuts and production halted and buys no longer, brands have limited staff and limited resources. So they're now relying heavily on earned media, which is, if not free, it's very cost effective. And earned media, or organic media as it relates to digital, are websites, blogs, email newsletters, and the use of social media platforms. And Medium.com quoted earned media as a key role in most sales. It is very transparent and lives on, and it is more credible versus paid media. Why? Because you have to work for it. And I 100% agree. Another upside to earned media as we move through COVID-19 is that audiences are now more engaged than ever before because we're all home. We're indoors under mandatory stay-at-home orders, and we're scrolling our phone and our computers more than usual.
Except I must be the exception to that. I get my report from my iPhone on Sunday and it says your viewing has been down, but I do assume it means like we are reading more emails, we are scrolling through more feeds.
Absolutely. So you'll see in a second, in a COVID-19 world, brands are utilizing e-newsletters slightly different in that, yes, they're still pushing product for profit, but right behind that is messaging of doing good.
Mm.
So on social media, brands are giving away product to frontline heroes by asking followers to tag such individuals needing highlighting. They're hosting live workouts in collaboration with influencers. And on the back end, this increases brands' engagements. Majority of brands are now producing face masks, and fashionable ones, I should say. Wearing protective face gear is going to be our new normal, so why not pivot and produce face masks? And by doing so, they're able to garner earned media on editorial websites whose stories consist of fashion during COVID. There are stories every day or every other day about top 10 fashionable masks or where to buy face masks. So and an example of having to rely heavily on earned media to push these new products is because paid media is being halted. A company that I'm PR consulting for, we attempted to sponsor an Instagram post regarding masks and it was refused. And per Instagram, they temporarily banned advertisements and branded content that promoted certain medical supplies, including face masks.
Which is so fascinating to me. So brands are basically prevented from promoting what they're trying to sell, at least some things that they're trying to sell, which obviously means the turn toward earned media and maybe even more philanthropy.
Exactly. Brands are now pushing philanthropic efforts to the forefront. They're donating food, they're donating masks and other products, and they're showing a bit of transparency. They're allowing you to see their production houses. You're seeing masks, fabrics stacked near sewing machines. Designers and brand executives are utilizing Instagram Live and stories. You see them in sweats with their children, they're cooking or they're learning to cook, like Olivier from Balmain seen here. They're being relatable. There's no glitz or no glam, and it's a great thing to see.
It's so fascinating. It's a lot more raw than it was. And of course, that puts us all in the mind of influencers, designers, brand execs now taking on this influencer role. So what are the influencers going to do?
Of course, promoting brands and pushing their followers to buy is their business. But then what happens when followers can't afford these items? Right now, tagging a $200 cashmere tee with a swipe up to purchase can come off a bit insensitive right now. So you'll see influencers, they're still tagging brands, but with a philanthropic angle. Buy this tee and this cool brand will donate 10% of proceeds to this charity. Or you may notice influencers pushing loungewear because why? Everyone is working from home. So what is comfortable and still looks good on Zoom, from the waist up, and is affordable. Influencers, they're utilizing Instagram Lives. They're having fun on TikTok. TikTok is a platform that pre-COVID may have skewed too young for their demographic, but they're having to come from behind just pretty images. They're having to be more transparent, and it's all about live content right now. Influencers, they're now volunteering, whether it's dropping off meals, packing meals. They're donating product that they themselves were gifted to select followers. And they're also heavily promoting small businesses.
And this is a theme that Kristen was even talking about, this whole notion that you've got to invest in the future of your brand now. Now is the time to do it, right?
Yeah, and the thing is, when the world returns to a state of normalcy, you want your brand to be in the conversations of they did good, they donated, they volunteered, they cared. And because that is so, they now have my continued support, or I'm now a fan of this brand. And I'll end my portion of this with an excerpt from a Forbes article entitled Managing Fashion Influencers in the Age of Coronavirus. They interviewed Risa Lake of Digital Brand Architects, which is one of the first influencer management companies. And they asked her, where does she see all this heading? And her response was in line with my thinking. And she said, that it is hard to say. She said, we have all had to put our marketing hats back on. From the influencer side, content will continue to be more personal. She says, I do not see us going back to the uber curated photos on Instagram. Over the next couple of months, brand launches and live events will all go digital. More influencers will use their platform for good and to support small businesses. We will have stronger data to support the businesses of influencer marketing, higher engagement rates, stronger conversion growth across platforms. And TikTok will be a stronger platform than ever, and brands will focus strategies and have to rethink the prescriptive nature of brand briefs. 100% agree.
I appreciate the work you did thinking this through, because it's so interesting and it ties so well with what Kristen was saying earlier. So I think maybe we can bring her back in on our conversation. We've spent a lot of this past half hour or so talking about the past, and then now during the COVID-19 pandemic. Let's start looking forward. And I realize that predicting the future is totally a fool's errand. Today we will be those fools. Maybe if we start with some smaller signals, though, signs of things that are coming in trends, that might be a little bit wiser of us. So first question to the both of you is, what signals are you seeing of what comes next in your spaces?
You want to go, Kristen?
Go for it, Kristen. Sorry, I should have called you guys out.
Okay. I mean, in terms of signals that I'm seeing, it's, I guess it's starting to emerge of that's such a interesting, I mean, as I had started to get into, it's how do people start to retarget and get out there and reinvest. So, I had talked about this briefly, but, it's kind of the new trends and the new platforms and how are they starting to engage. So with the trends of some of those, it's the gaming industry. There's been big trends with Animal Crossing and those type of brand partnerships. It's digital marketing on places like TikTok. I think that the new layering of having the shop button on these platforms is really kind of helping them stand out. But then it's also some of the smaller opportunities of the integration of, looking at how you can make sure that it's just really authentic in whatever messages that you're putting out there. So in terms of making sure that it's not going to be the same market out there. And so we have to just, as we're starting to move into this next phase, make sure that we are very familiar with how people are, be it buying, if you're looking at ROI, is it going to be the same opportunity? Like there are going to be different changes. So I don't know if that completely answers it, but.
No, it gives us a good sense. Anisha, what about you? What signals are you seeing?
I see that everyone's relying on earned media. Like I kind of just ran through everyone, content is key, pushing out content. That's the gist that I'm getting. It's earned media and content.
Yeah, I think it's interesting too, because I have seen a lot of content that people are creating, obviously using user-generated UGC, but also you're seeing a lot that's animated, which has been interesting. So working around the creative solutions, I'll put it this way, to the problems that we're confronting have been super, super interesting and more in-house, which we had seen as a trend coming along, but relying less on an agency and creating more in-house. I think about Textile, who we do a lot of work with. They have Kate Hudson's Fabletics, Shoedazzle, several other fashion brands. They create, I'm gonna get the number wrong, but something like 80,000 pieces of content in-house each year, which is just mind-boggling. So you're owned and you're earned. But then Kristen, does that leave you guys out in the woods in the paid space?
No, I mean, like kind of what I said from the very beginning, I think there always has to be a need for it, like that is how you're driving and you need that opportunity out there. That's how you're lifting and you're making sure that searchability is still there and you're really, it's there's not ever going, you have to have a balance. There always has to be a balance between, and there's a need of paid and earned media.
Excellent. Let's talk about jobs in this coming future. We know now is a tough time, let's admit that. But as we move beyond this, what do you two see in terms of the work of the next generation? Is it more in content creation? Do we need more PR practitioners? Where are those openings that people could be looking for? Anisha?
As far as, I think to answer that question, I think people, what you need to have is you have to be knowledgeable of all social platforms, especially now. Like if you weren't a TikTok person before pre-COVID, then you need to be one now. So I think being knowledgeable across all social platforms, I think creativity was always important, but I think it's even more so important now, as well as content. Like I keep pushing that word content. Being able to come up with content plans and creative ways to get messages out there is going to be what you need to have on your resume in order to, be seen. And I also feel that like freelancers, like that freelance space is going to open up rather than bring someone in-house and, that's the insurance and that whole factor. But having just people on a freelance schedule, this way you can pull creativity from so many different, areas rather than just having one person in-house and that is your go-to.
Kristen, do you think it's the perfect space for the generalist or the specialist as we move forward? In other words, should you know a little bit about everything or should you have a deep dive in just one vertical?
Well, I think that the way you can approach it as a specialist is that if you have specialists, then you can hone them in and utilize them for compact elements of projects, which may in the long run be more cost efficient, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it does. It does. I know that both of you have some interest in the gaming space. I know we've hit on it a little bit. As we look to the future, and it kind of relates to, I'm starting to read through some of the Q&A over here. It kind of relates to some of the questions. As we look to this future, how significant is gaming going to be? I mean, think about, Kristen, you've been with Sonic and the SEGA folks for a while and done some consulting with them. You were the one who did the face mask that everybody was just in awe of. That was blue face mask. You saw it on Instagram a couple of years ago. Do we lean harder in on gaming as we move forward?
Yes.
End of story. Yes.
That's my answer, yes. No, I mean, I think that, what has happened, Animal Crossing was an opportune moment in itself. I think that it could have been very successful even without the circumstances, but it opened up and was even a bigger example of what is going on with partnerships and the space and the opportunity in game and with the chat options in some of these games as well. But then you also have Twitch and everything that's going on with Twitch, and people are really now starting to see, Twitch has been around for a long time and they haven't been utilizing it to its full potential. And it's just starting to open up and unfold the opportunities for partnerships and visibility within Twitch. It's a very amazing focused area to really open up with gaming, and of course e-leagues, I don't even have to talk about how big that is. So, I just really believe this is an underserved and just ripe market to really dig into.
I'm going to turn to some of the Q&A. I want to thank Kenny. Kenny submitted a few questions that have been really great. The first one that I think is probably maybe the most important to him. I'm going to make a guess this one will be the most important. He says, I'm going to graduate this semester. Due to this pandemic, I'm confused on how to get a job. What do you think is the best way to get a job in the pandemic? Anisha, you have any thoughts on that?
I had actually had a student ask me this question. My advice was to keep pushing forward because the world is going to open back up, and the people who were unfortunately furloughed or had to be laid off, those spaces, may become available. And I was telling one of my students that, they may want graduates because they don't have to pay them, not as much, as they would someone who has 10 years plus experience. So I was telling her, you actually have a leg up. So keep pushing forward. Email the person. Let's say if you go on Indeed and it says you may be reporting to the director of marketing, find out who that person is, get their email and email them and let them know that you're graduating and that you have this experience, and that, you know, if you can come in and even, you know, like intern or anything, just still push forward. Don't stop, you know, and I think it'll work out. I think those who are graduating actually have like I said, again, a leg up.
I always hold strong to what you're saying, but also, you know, I don't think I've gotten a job that was not from or with through somehow somebody I knew was in that company. So I'm always telling students that as well. Kristen, I want to pivot to another question from Stacy. She asked, what would you recommend for companies planning to launch within the next couple months? It's kind of related to what, you know, if you're graduating in a way, or if you're out there getting ready to launch a brand, which we heard, you know, in the 2008 financial crisis, we saw a lot of brands launch, a lot of agencies launch that are huge today. So what's your take for that? What is your recommendation for brand launching now?
I mean, I think that the biggest thing is pre-launch to have a very solid strategy in place, you know, and that's a strategy that builds on, of course, as we had talked about, a balance. You know, you have to have your paid media and your earned media out there. Like, the biggest thing that you have to start to do is have a very cohesive look for your brand. And you have to make sure that it is, you know, something that is very easy to communicate with, great messaging that can connect to your end consumer. You know, as soon as that starts going and you start to have that flow and create the content, you know, you will start having, you know, something that's pretty solid out there. But, you know, I think that it is a very competitive market, you know, but it doesn't mean that people should stop. I think is at the end of the day, you know, you have to be able to move businesses forward. You know, I live right off of Abbot Kinney, where I'm seeing shops open, and I'm like, I'm sure it's very risky and scary for them right now. But the thing is people have to have strategies in place. Business has to move forward. The reason that, I mean, we have to have an economy that moves forward. And like, that's why we are all, you know, looking for opportunities. That's why we're on this call today.
Yeah. Well, and I have to say, I mean, anything you look at for direct to consumer, the last 6 months, and before that even, but 6 months past, we have seen a skyrocket in the number of direct to consumer brands that are really doing well. And Anisha, I think we have to thank your people for that, because a lot of what they're doing to get traction is earned. They don't have the money to spend, and so they're looking for those media posts, the write-ups on who, what, where, if it's in the fashion space or whatever space you're in. You know, I read an article on Bon Appetit recently about a new line of cookware that started by 2 women in New York City, and they have 8 people working for them. And their whole position is, oh, we're creating cookware that's good for Instagram. So it's Instagrammable cookware. So when you cook, you know, so we have to thank your people. Thanks, Anisha. Somebody did ask about B2B, so business to business. They're not necessarily concerned, she says, about building image for consumers at this time. What should they be doing? Any thought?
Well, I mean, I think the thing is that they still have an image, and they still have to find a way to have messaging out there. The problem is I'm sure for B2B right now, that is an even bigger obstacle, because the B2B world is how much opportunity, like depending on what industry, you know, a lot of B2B is more of at a standstill. That's a lot about, I think, earned media right now, and how are you just continuing to have great messaging out there and communication, and how are you making sure you're staying informed?
Anisha, anything to add on that one?
No.
But I will ask you this one, though, from a former student of mine. So I'm excited to see this one. Stephanie Armenta, who is out in the world doing amazing things right now. She writes, and I think we've all seen this, with emails and SMS, so text messaging quadrupling. Do you see a rise in the open click-through rates? Do you see a decline? Do you feel like people are more overwhelmed and unsubscribing? Is it best to make sure messaging is now kept away from the virus, more focused on happiness? In other words, what should people be doing in part of that owned space, their emails and their SMS, to not get the unsubscribes?
I don't think there's a right or wrong answer for that. I just feel like, you've already subscribed to these places. So whether it's John Elliott, whether it's the cover tour, you've already subscribed. So you were open to getting their emails. I do feel like everyone is pushing COVID it's on top of everyone's minds. I will say I have had an uptick in the emails I'm receiving, and they're all COVID related. And for me, I'm very on top of my emails. I have anxiety like that. So I'm always opening, always opening. I haven't found myself subscribing yet, but I have found myself reading just the title, the heading, or the subject that you see in your email box. And if I feel like it's something, I don't really feel like it today, or I'll come back, like I may not necessarily, I'll open it just so it's not a new email, but I won't necessarily read through it. So I think because everything is so COVID related and it can be overwhelming, I'm not necessarily taking in all of the information. Mm-hmm. I'm doing so in pieces. Mm-hmm. So again, I don't think there's a right or wrong answer. It's based on your product and what you're putting out there. Are you giving information? A lot of people want that information. Are you trying to sell? If someone doesn't have the funds right now and you keep emailing them with things that they may want, they're going to unsubscribe. So again, it just depends really person to person, in my opinion.
Yeah, I would agree. This is an interesting one. There's two, one from Brenna and one from Abigail, and they're very related. So I'll ask them at the same time and probably participate a little more in the answer, because it does have to do with the college. Going back to college soon, my question is, how do you think FIDM or schools like it will shift the curriculum for marketing? So that's one question. And then Abigail asked, with someone who's been wanting a career change to digital marketing, is now the best time or worst time to switch, because most companies would rather continue with a budget? So let me take that first question. How do colleges pivot during this time? And Kristen and I are actually developing a class that you're currently teaching that is building to be offered college-wide on the strategy of digital marketing. And it's an interesting time because strategy changes from day to day. And you can even see when you're tracking, like Kristen was showing, the Google search trends, the Amazon search trends. When you're tracking these things, it's going to change your strategy on a weekly basis. So what we look for is, what are the underlying themes and what are the underlying skills that a marketer has to know? And that's what we teach toward. And then of course we use the current examples. So, we teach you how to look toward Google for those kinds of trends. And I think, obviously, I think it's best done in a school landscape, but if you're thinking about a career change to digital marketing, I actually do think it's a good time for it. Are you a creative thinker? Are you a critical thinker? And then two, and I'll stop talking after this and let you guys offer some input as well, but I think what we teach at FIDM in our program of digital marketing is three primary pillars. Understand marketing. What's a brand? Understand design. Can you open Photoshop and Illustrator? Can you scaffold on those skills with Premiere editing or audio editing for podcasting, which you guys know is a huge space for me. And then the last one is analytics. We did not talk about analytics today. It would deserve its whole own hour. Do you get analytics? Can you create something actionable and tell me from that actionable act how you got to it, right? Like what analytics told you. So I'll stop. What about you two? Thoughts on good time to switch to the career, and how do you teach this kind of thing in 2020 with everything changing?
You literally answered it. How I would answer it. Critical thinking, knowing analytics. And again, I think it's a great time to switch. Everyone is pivoting. This is new territory for everybody. So literally come on over.
We welcome you. Everybody's welcome. Kristen, thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I think that, even when I teach, it's every quarter is different. It's such a super exciting time to be a part of this. When we started this quarter and had to teach in Zoom versus the real class environment, it was just almost like a new social experiment in that, you know, which was the perfect thing for a class like this, because it is just almost part of the integration of what's going on in the time. So when you look at the opportunities, it's everything you have to do is just, you have to be very, you know, on top of and passionate about research and understanding, and be able to look at the perspective and diving in. And I think that the opportunity for someone to come over, it's really, you know, ripe. You know, this is the perfect time. There are so many new platforms and so much development out there. You know, things aren't stopping in digital right now. They're moving forward, both on company and business side, as well as on development and new, you know, new platforms. So,
Yeah. I know we're short on time, so I just wanted to give you both a second to give a final thought, if you have one, on everything we've been saying and where you think the best way forward. Anisha?
I feel like I'll run out of time. I will say that I see there's so many questions, and I would hate for someone to like not have gotten through. So can we provide our emails for people to email us if they have any questions?
I believe our folks in marketing will be sharing our emails when they send out the links later this week.
Okay.
So certainly we can watch for that. Kristen, less than a minute. Final thoughts?
I would just say, you know, just look at the opportunities and know in this time that everything is shifting and changing, that in the future it is a new normalization, and we just are here to absorb it all in and figure out how to look for a way to excite and look to the future. So I'm excited to have shared with you guys and you know, excited for the future.
And it's so hard to fit it all in 1 hour because there's so much.
I know, there was so much more I would have loved to share. We didn't get to talk about all of the amazing things happening on TikTok and all of that, but you know, in the future there will be more.
Yes, there will definitely be more. Thanks to you both, Anisha Dubois and Kristen Zimmer, for joining us this afternoon. They're awesome members of the faculty here at FIDM, so we're so grateful that you were able to come with us and spend some time with us this afternoon. As we said at the beginning of our time together this afternoon, this is just the first in a series. 2 weeks from today, we're going to explore the topic of retail and e-commerce. From panic buying to a record-setting Mother's Day, all with sky-high unemployment rates, the majority of brick and mortar stores still closed for business. We have some top experts coming from guests, Goop. In addition, we have the head of the LA office for one of the top fashion recruiting agencies, 24/7, as well as one of our own in-house experts from FIDM to discuss the future of retail. So that's on Tuesday, May 26th. And then two weeks after that, on June 2nd, we'll be talking about the future of culture. This one is going to be so interesting, where we'll talk with the deputy director of the Broad, so a museum in downtown Los Angeles, the curator of FIDM's own museum. We have an incredible fashion museum on campus. He has some things to share. And then we have the founder of an experiential marketing agency. So as part of the marketing conversation over the last year, everybody's been talking about experiences. Well, how do you do experiences when we're all at home? That's what we'll talk about in that seminar. We hope you will join us. In the meantime, you can follow us online for updates, of course, all the events that are to come. And we remind you, as we do our students and everyone else, stay inspired. Thanks.